Hello, welcome. I'm Ella Eland, a self-taught artist who has an addiction to the water, particularly the ocean. Water is probably the subject matter I paint the most, and I'm constantly asked, how do you paint that? How do you make it look so realistic? At this point, I've been painting for about 5 years now, and I've learned a lot of tips and tricks along the way through constant practice and experimentation. Water is much easier to paint than you think. In fact, it's probably the easiest thing to paint once you get the basics down. Watercolor can be a tricky medium, but I'm going to simplify the whole process for you so you can understand how to use it more efficiently. You're going to need some watercolor paper. My favorite paper is the Fluid 100 cold press 300 pound watercolor paper. I'll link all the materials I use in the description below, and you can also find more info on what I use and my recommendations in the free guide provided as well. You'll need your watercolor palette. I use the Winsor Newton Professional Watercolors. Brushes, you'll need a pretty large watercolor brush and some smaller detail brushes. The best brushes to use for watercolor are brushes that have very soft bristles, as they can hold a lot of water and make it easier to spread the paint. Then you'll need a water cup for rinsing brushes and picking up water, and a cloth or paper towel to clean and dry your brushes. You'll need some tape for securing your paper. I used artist tape, but you can also use drafting tape, masking tape, or washi tape if you don't have this tape. You'll need a pencil and eraser to sketch out your painting. I recommend using a ruler as well. And then you'll need a board or a clipboard to tape your paper to. Anything that is hard and flat will do. Now let's get started. Start by taping the edges of your paper to the board. I usually just eyeball it, but if you want a perfect border, use a ruler to draw out precise edges. Okay, this is the reference photo I'll be using. You can find it in the free guide below. I'm going to simplify it a little bit to make it even easier for you to paint, but if you want to try and replicate it completely, go for it. To start, I'm going to draw on the horizon line using a ruler as a guide. Make sure you are applying extremely light pressure on your pencil. You just barely want to be able to see the line. Now begin sketching the little ripples of the water. These are essentially just lines and blobs. The great thing about painting water is that you don't have to be too precise to make it look realistic, because water is constantly moving and changing. Notice how light the lines I'm making are. You can barely see them. I repeat, do not apply too much pressure on your pencil. Again, you barely want to see the lines. Once you are done with the sketch, take a kneaded eraser and lightly tap on the pencil lines to lighten them up even more if need be. Unfortunately, I have lost my good kneaded eraser, and the one I have found hardened for some reason and is unusable at the moment. So I just took a regular eraser and lightly tapped and erased marks using that. The purpose of this is to ensure that your pencil outline is light enough that marks will not show through underneath your paint layers. Okay, now let's get painting. A simple trick that is absolutely life-changing is to put a black and white filter on your reference photo. This simplifies the painting process because it forces you to focus on establishing the proper values, or lights and darks, in the painting rather than getting caught up on creating colors. First thing you want to do is wet your entire paper with water using a large soft brush. This will help you create the gradient of the sky and the water. Now wet your brush again and pick up a blue color. I mixed a little bit of a turquoise green color with it, but you can just add some yellow and you'll get a similar color as well. Starting from the top, begin adding the blue color to the wet paper. The color will go wherever the paper is wet. To create a nice gradient, add more paint and water to the top, and then blend it out by adding more water towards the bottom where the horizon line is. Make sure your paper is wet for this step, as that will allow the paint to spread more evenly. Now we're going to add the yellow. To do this, make sure that the paper is very wet so that the yellow easily blends with the blue. To create that subtle gradient, apply water to the paper without any paint where the two colors meet. This will help lightly blend the colors. Continually add yellow to the paper until you are satisfied with how dark it is. To do the water, we are going to repeat what we did at the top of the painting for the sky, but in reverse. So you add blue to the bottom and yellow at the top towards the horizon line. This is because, looking at the reference, the lightest color in the water closest to the horizon line is yellow because it is reflecting the yellow of the sky. Watercolor is all about working light to dark. For the water, do not make the yellow as dark as the yellow of the sky. Now let's begin painting the little ripples and waves. Make sure the surface of your paper is almost dry to completely dry for this step. This gives you more control over where the paint goes, which allows you to get more detailed. The literal key to watercolor is layers. It is literally just building up layers and layers of paint until you reach the level of depth you are looking for. I personally like a lot of contrast in my painting, so I build up dozens and dozens of layers and use a wet on dry technique. So here, just add lots of blue color to the places where the waves and ripples are. Again, you don't have to worry about being too precise, but follow the reference photo closely if you need guidance. As you get more detailed, use more paint than water and make sure that the paper is completely dry before you apply another layer of paint. This is called the wet on dry technique. It allows you to paint more bold colors and get sharper details and contrast. The more layers I add, I tend to mix a darker blue color for the darker parts of the painting. Notice that watercolors always dry slightly lighter than the color they first were when you applied the paint. Also notice how dry my brush is here. I use a very concentrated amount of paint and just enough water to allow it to spread. Sometimes I use too much paint, which makes it look too sharp and unnatural. To fix this, I dip a clean brush in some water and brush it on the place I want to smooth out. This helps blur any harsh, unwanted lines. Here I felt like the sky was too light, so I darkened it up by applying a light layer of clean water across the whole surface of the sky and then adding more blue and orange until it reached the level of contrast I was looking for. If you do this, make sure to clean your brush between using the orange and blue so you don't risk muddying up the colors. Like I said before, watercolor is literally just building layers upon layers upon layers until you reach the level of saturation and contrast that you want. You can stop whenever, you can keep going. It's all up to you. Once you feel like your painting is complete, carefully peel off the tape. If some of the paint has bled through the tape to your border, you can cover it up using white acrylic paint or gouache, or what I like to use is a white gel pen or Posca paint marker. Before calling it quits, make sure to sign your masterpiece. To keep it protected, I recommend spraying a varnish on it. This helps preserve the color and gives it a nice finish. Again, materials are in the description below and in the free step-by-step guide also listed below. Follow the instructions on your varnish to ensure you are using it properly. Make sure to spray it evenly across the surface of your painting and then let it dry for a minimum of 2 hours. Boom! You've just learned how to paint water using watercolor. I'd love to see what you've created. Send me a DM on Instagram, TikTok, or email me. If you have any questions, let me know as well. Be sure to check out the free guide below for detailed info on the materials I used, techniques I mentioned, and a more detailed step-by-step tutorial. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.